My hands shook as I read the words. Premises closed by order of the county. All assets seized for non-payment of taxes. 3 years. That's how long it took for everything I built to turn to dust. My name is Della Washington, and I'm 72 years old. For 40 years, I ran Della's Kitchen, the best soul food spot on the east side of Atlanta. We served collard greens that made people weep, fried chicken so crispy it sang when you bit into it, and peach cobbler that folks drove from 3 counties over to taste. I started that business with nothing but my grandmother's recipes, a prayer, and $500 I saved from cleaning houses. When I retired 3 years ago, I didn't sell Della's Kitchen. I gave it to my son, Terrence, free and clear. The building, the equipment, the recipes, the loyal customers, everything. I signed those papers with tears in my eyes, thinking I was setting my boy up for life, thinking I was leaving a legacy for my grandchildren. I was a fool. "Mama, you need to calm down." Terrence stood behind me now, his voice tight and defensive. At 41 years old, my son was still handsome, still had my late husband's strong jawline and broad shoulders. But somewhere along the way, he'd lost his spine. "Calm down?" I turned to face him, and I could feel my blood pressure rising. "Terrence, this restaurant was worth $400,000. How do you lose a paid-off business in 3 years?" He looked away, couldn't meet my eyes. That's when I knew. This wasn't just mismanagement. This was something worse. "Where's Candace?" I asked. His wife's name hung in the air like smoke. Terrence shifted his weight from foot to foot, the way he used to do when he was a boy caught in a lie. "She's at home. She's upset about all this." "Upset?" My voice rose despite myself. "I gave y'all a gold mine, and 3 years later the county is selling off my industrial stoves to pay your tax debt. Upset doesn't even begin to cover what I'm feeling right now." An elderly couple walked past us into the Asian fusion restaurant next door. They'd watched Della's Kitchen die a slow death over the past year. I could see the pity in their eyes, and it burned worse than any insult. "Mama, please, can we go somewhere and talk about this?" "Talk about what, Terrence? How you let that woman destroy everything I spent 4 decades building?" "Don't blame Candace for this." Now his voice had an edge to it. That defensive tone he always got when it came to his wife. "The restaurant business is hard, you know that. The pandemic hit us, then food costs went up, labor costs. I survived 2 recessions, 9/11, the 2008 crash, and the pandemic," I interrupted. "I kept that restaurant running through it all, so don't tell me about hard times." I pulled out my phone and opened my photos. I'd been documenting things, taking pictures every time I drove past over the last 18 months. I showed him the screen. April 2024. I drive past and the lunch rush is dead. 6 customers, at noon, on a Friday. I swiped to the next photo. June 2024. The sign's burnt out. Half the letters don't light up anymore. Swipe. September 2024. The windows are filthy. I can see trash piled up inside. Swipe. November 2024. Closed sign in the window. Middle of dinner rush. Terrence looked at each photo like they were physical blows. "And you know what broke my heart most? I called. I called you every week asking if you needed help, if you needed advice. And every single time you told me everything was fine. Candace told me business was booming. She said y'all were expanding, talking about opening a second location. We were trying to protect you." "Protect me?" I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of the ruins of my life's work. Baby, I didn't need protection. I needed honesty. I needed my son to be man enough to tell me the truth. A text message buzzed on my phone. It was from my daughter, Yvette, Terrence's younger sister. She lived in Houston, worked as a hospital administrator. We'd been texting all morning. "Mama, are you at the restaurant? Please tell me you're not confronting him alone." I didn't respond. Yvette had warned me about Candace from the beginning. She'd seen something in that woman that I was too hopeful to notice. Terrence, I need you to be straight with me. What happened to the money? My son was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. Cars passed on the street behind us. Somewhere nearby, someone was playing gospel music, Kirk Franklin's voice floating through the autumn air. Candace wanted to renovate, he finally said. She said the place looked old-fashioned. She hired a designer, changed the whole interior. New tables, new paint, new everything. Cost us $70,000. My heart dropped into my stomach. $70,000? Terrence, that restaurant's charm was that it felt like your grandmother's kitchen. People came there for comfort food in a comfortable place. I know, Mama. I know. But Candace said we needed to attract a younger crowd, a different demographic. She changed the menu, too, added things like deconstructed collard greens and artisanal mac and cheese. I closed my eyes. And let me guess, the old customers stopped coming, and the new customers never showed up. Pretty much. What else? He hesitated. She hired her cousin to manage the finances, to do the books. Before we continue, please drop a comment below as I'd love to hear your thoughts and subscribe to the channel to help us hit that big 1,000 subscriber milestone. Her cousin. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Terrence, please tell me you kept oversight of the money. Please tell me you were checking the accounts, monitoring the spending. The way he looked away told me everything. She said I didn't understand modern business practices, he whispered. She said her cousin had an MBA, that I should trust the professionals. And how much did this cousin steal from you? Mama, we don't know that she stole. How much? The accountant I finally hired last month, he found about $90,000 unaccounted for. Could be more. The records are a mess. $90,000. On top of the $70,000 wasted on renovations. I'd given my son a thriving business, and his wife had stripped it clean like vultures on a carcass. Where's the money now? Where's Candace's cousin? Moved to Chicago 6 months ago. Changed her number. Of course she did. I looked at the padlock again, at the orange notice flapping in the October breeze. And the back taxes? How much do you owe? $42,000. His voice was barely audible. Candace's cousin was supposed to be paying the quarterly taxes. She told us she was filing everything, but she wasn't. She was just taking the money. Terrence Jeremiah Washington. I used his full name, the name I gave him when I held him as a newborn, the name I called him by when he graduated top of his class at Morehouse. Look at me. He raised his eyes, and I saw my baby boy. But I also saw a 41-year-old man who'd let his wife destroy his mother's legacy. Did Candace know? Did she know her cousin was stealing? The question hung between us like a guillotine blade. I don't know, Mama. She says she didn't. But she bought a new Mercedes last year. Cash. And we went to Turks and Caicos in January. First-class tickets, private villa. And she's been shopping, Mama. Designer bags, expensive shoes. I asked her where the money was coming from, and she said her marketing business was doing well. What marketing business? She started a social media consulting company last year. Says she has clients. I felt sick. Baby, has it occurred to you that your wife might have been in on it? That maybe she and her cousin planned this whole thing? Mama, no. Candace wouldn't. She's my wife. She's the mother of my children. My grandchildren. Zion was 8, Amara was 6. Beautiful babies who I loved more than my own life. And they were watching their daddy lose everything because he was too blind to see what his wife really was. I need to sit down. I moved toward my car, a 10-year-old Honda that I'd kept running through pure determination and prayer. My knees hurt, my head hurt, my heart hurt. Terrence followed me. Mama, I know I messed up. I know I disappointed you. But I need your help. The county is auctioning everything next month. The building, the equipment, all of it. If I could just get a loan, maybe I could. A loan? I stared at him. Terrence, you're $200,000 in debt. You have no business, no income, and your credit is probably destroyed. Who's going to loan you money? You could. The words hit me like a slap. Baby, I'm 72 years old. I live on Social Security and a small pension. I don't have that kind of money. What about the house? You could take out a reverse mortgage. Use the equity. You want me to risk my home? The home your father and I bought in 1978? The home where you and your sister grew up? The only thing I have left? It would be temporary. Just until I get back on my feet. I could rebuild, Mama. I could make this right. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw the truth. He wasn't going to make this right. Not as long as Candace had her claws in him. She'd already destroyed one business. Why wouldn't she destroy his second chance too? No, I said quietly. I can't do that. His face hardened. Can't or won't? Does it matter? We stood there in the parking lot, two people who shared blood and history and 41 years of love, and I realized we were strangers now. The business had been a bridge between us, and Candace had burned it down. Fine. Terrence's voice was cold now. I guess I'll figure it out on my own, like I always do. Like you always do? Terrence, I gave you everything. I handed you success on a silver platter. You didn't have to work for it, didn't have to sacrifice for it, and you let it slip through your fingers because you couldn't stand up to your wife. Don't talk about Candace like that. Somebody needs to. That woman has been poisoned from the day you married her, but you're too whipped to see it. I'm out of here. He turned to walk away, heading toward a car I hadn't noticed before. A white BMW, new. Had to be $60,000 at least. Terrence. My voice stopped him. Whose car is that? It's Candace's. She bought it a few months ago. With what money? You just told me the restaurant was failing. Her business, Mama. I told you, her consulting business is doing well. He drove away without looking back, leaving me standing alone in front of the locked restaurant, a business that had been my pride, my joy, my legacy. Now it was just another failed dream, another statistic. I sat in my car for a long time after he left. My phone rang twice. First Yvette, then my best friend Nadine, calling from morning service at First Baptist. I didn't answer either call. I just sat there, staring at the orange eviction notice, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. That's when I saw it. Taped on the inside of the window, barely visible behind the eviction notice. A business card. I got out of my car, walked closer, squinted at the small print. Westside Properties LLC. We buy restaurants. Cash offers. And below that, a phone number. Something clicked in my brain. A memory. 3 months ago, Candace had mentioned something at Sunday dinner. She'd been on her phone scrolling through real estate listings. This area is about to blow up, she'd said. All these old restaurants are going to be worth a fortune once they start redeveloping. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and Googled Westside Properties LLC. The search results made my blood run cold. Westside Properties LLC. Founded 18 months ago. Owner and CEO, Candace Mitchell Washington. My daughter-in-law owned the company that was buying my foreclosed restaurant. She hadn't ruined the business by accident. She'd destroyed it on purpose. I sat in my living room at 2 a.m, surrounded by papers I'd printed from the internet, my reading glasses perched on my nose. A cold cup of coffee on the table beside me. I hadn't slept, couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that business card, that company name. Westside Properties, LLC, my daughter-in-law's company. I'd spent the last 6 hours digging through public records, business filings, property transfers. The picture that emerged made me physically ill. Candace had formed her company 18 months ago, right around the time the restaurant started its steep decline. In that time, Westside Properties had acquired 4 restaurants in the neighborhood. All of them had been family-owned. All of them had mysteriously failed within months of Candace or her associates getting involved. One as a consultant. Another hired her cousin as a bookkeeper. A third took a loan from an investment group Candace was connected to. The pattern was clear as day. She was a vulture, circling struggling businesses, helping them fail faster, then swooping in to buy the properties for pennies on the dollar. The neighborhood was gentrifying, property values climbing every month. Those 4 restaurants she'd bought for nothing were now worth 3 times what she paid. And Della's Kitchen was going to be number 5. My phone buzzed, a text from Yvette. "Mama, it's 2 a.m. Please tell me you're sleeping." I called her instead. She answered on the first ring. "I knew you weren't sleeping," she said. "What did you find?" I told her everything. About Westside Properties, about the pattern of failed businesses, about Candace's deliberate destruction of the restaurant. Yvette listened in silence, and when I finished, she let out a long breath. "That manipulative, evil—" She caught herself. "Mama, we need to tell Terrence." "He won't believe me. You saw how he was today. That woman has him completely blind." "Then we go to a lawyer. This has to be illegal. Fraud, embezzlement, something." "With what money, baby? Lawyers cost thousands, and we'd need to prove intent, prove she deliberately sabotaged the business. That cousin of hers who took the money is in Chicago. Probably used a fake name on all the paperwork." "So, we just let her get away with it?" Yvette's voice cracked with frustration. "Let her steal your legacy and destroy Terrence's life?" "I didn't say that." I looked at the papers spread across my coffee table. "I'm going to talk to her, face to face, and I'm going to record every word." "Mama, no. If she's as calculating as you think, she won't confess to anything." "Maybe not. But people get cocky, especially people who think they've already won." I glanced at the clock. "I'm going over there in the morning, before Terrence goes to work." "Let me fly out there. I can get a flight tonight, be there by—" "No, baby. You have your own life, your own family. This is between me and Candace." We talked for another hour, Yvette trying to convince me to wait, to think it through. But I'd already made up my mind. I'd spent 40 years building something beautiful, and I wasn't going to let it die without a fight. At 7:30 the next morning, I pulled up to Terrence and Candace's house in Stone Mountain. It was a beautiful home, 4 bedrooms, professionally landscaped yard. They'd bought it 5 years ago, right before they took over the restaurant. I'd helped with the down payment. Gave them $30,000 I'd saved for retirement. Looking at it now, I wondered how much of that money had come from my restaurant's bleeding accounts. Candace's new white BMW sat in the driveway next to Terrence's older Ford truck. I parked on the street, checked my phone to make sure the recording app was working, and walked to the front door. I rang the doorbell, heard footsteps inside, children's voices. The door opened, and there was Amara, my grandbaby, still in her pajamas, her hair in 2 afro puffs. "Grandma!" She launched herself at me, and I caught her, held her tight. She smelled like cocoa butter and childhood innocence. "Hey, sweet girl. You getting ready for school?" "Uh-huh. Mama's making breakfast. Daddy already left for work." Of course he did. Terrence was probably out desperately trying to find a job, trying to figure out how to support his family now that the restaurant was gone. "Is your mama here?" "She's in the kitchen. You want me to get her?" "I'll find her, baby. You go finish getting ready." Amara skipped back toward the stairs, and I stepped inside. The house smelled like turkey bacon and expensive candles. Everything was perfectly decorated, designer furniture, artwork on the walls. Nothing like the modest home Terrence grew up in. I found Candace in the kitchen, wearing silk pajamas that probably cost more than my monthly pension. She was scrolling through her phone while eggs cooked on the stove. When she saw me, surprise flashed across her face before she arranged it into a smile. "Della, this is unexpected." She'd always called me Della, never Mom, never Mama. I used to think it was respectful, her way of acknowledging I already had children. Now I realized it was distance. I was never family to her, just an obstacle. We need to talk. I'm getting the kids ready for school. Can this wait? No. Something in my voice made her put down her phone. She called up the stairs. Zion, Amara, take your breakfast upstairs. Watch TV in the playroom. The children thundered down, grabbed plates of food, and disappeared. Candace waited until we heard the playroom door close, then turned to me. What's this about? I pulled out my phone, pulled up the web page I'd bookmarked, turned the screen to face her. Westside Properties, LLC, founded by Candace Mitchell Washington. That's you, isn't it? Her expression didn't change, but I saw her jaw tighten slightly. I have several business interests. What's your point? My point is that you're buying my restaurant at auction next month, the same restaurant you destroyed. I didn't destroy anything. Terrence ran that business into the ground. Poor management, outdated menu, resistance to change. Don't. My voice came out harder than I intended. Don't you dare stand there and lie to my face. I found your pattern, Candace. 4 other restaurants in the last 18 months. Family businesses, all of them. You got inside, helped them fail, bought them cheap, and now you're doing it to my family. She leaned against the counter, studying me like I was an interesting insect. You're upset. I understand. Losing a business is traumatic, but you gave that restaurant to Terrence. What he chose to do with it isn't my fault. You hired your cousin to embezzle $90,000. My cousin made mistakes. She's young, inexperienced. We trusted the wrong person. She's in Chicago now, conveniently unreachable. Family sometimes disappoints us. You, of all people, should understand that, given how things turned out with your son. The words were designed to hurt, and they did. But I kept my face neutral. I have a question for you, Candace. Did Terrence know? Did he know what you were doing? For the first time, something real crossed her face. Satisfaction. My husband knows exactly what I tell him to know. Terrence is a good man, but he's weak. He doesn't have vision. He was content to run that little soul food shack for the rest of his life, serving collard greens to old ladies on fixed incomes. No ambition, no drive. That little soul food shack put food on your table, paid for this house, paid for those clothes you're wearing. And now it's going to make me $500,000. She smiled, and it was like watching a snake unhinge its jaw. The land alone is worth that much. Once I tear down that building and sell to the developers who are putting in condos, I'll triple my investment. You can't tear it down. That building has history, 40 years of memories, 40 years of grease stains and outdated equipment. The neighborhood is changing, Della. Those memories don't pay property taxes. I felt my hands shaking. I wanted to slap her, wanted to grab her by her silk pajamas and shake her until she showed a shred of decency. Instead, I kept my voice level. What about Terrence? What about your children? You destroyed their father's inheritance. Terrence will be fine. He'll find another job, and my children will benefit from having a mother who understands how to build real wealth. I'm teaching them that sentimentality is expensive, that you can't eat legacy. You're teaching them that family doesn't matter, that it's okay to steal and lie and destroy people's lives if there's profit in it. She checked her watch, a Rolex I hadn't seen before. I have a conference call in 20 minutes. If there's nothing else, I'm going to stop you. The words came out of my mouth before I'd fully formed the thought. I'm going to find a way to save that restaurant, and I'm going to expose what you've done. Candace laughed. Actually laughed. With what resources, Della? You're a 72-year-old woman living on Social Security. You have no money, no leverage, no power. The auction is in 3 weeks. The property is mine, and there's nothing you can do about it. She moved closer to me, her voice dropping to something almost intimate. Let me give you some advice. from one businesswoman to another. You lost. Accept it. Go home, spend time with your grandchildren while you can still see them, and stay out of my way. Because if you try to interfere with my business, if you go to Terrence with these paranoid conspiracy theories, I will make sure you never see Zion or Amara again. I'll convince my husband that you're suffering from dementia, that you're a danger to yourself and the children, and he'll believe me. He always believes me. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. You can't keep me from my grandchildren. Can't I? One call to CPS, claiming you're unstable. A restraining order, claiming you threatened me. It's remarkably easy to isolate an elderly person, especially one with no money for lawyers. Ask me how I know. The implication hung in the air. She'd done this before. Cut off someone's family, isolated them, destroyed them. Now get out of my house. Her voice was cold. And don't come back unless you're invited. I stood there for a moment, looking at this woman my son had married, this woman who was the mother of my grandchildren. She stared back at me, unflinching, absolutely certain of her victory. I turned and walked toward the front door. Behind me, I heard her call up the stairs. Zion, Amara, come down. Grandma's leaving. The children came running down, hugged me goodbye. I held them tight, kissed their foreheads, and tried not to cry. When I looked up, Candace was watching from the kitchen doorway, a small smile on her face. I got in my car and drove 3 blocks before I had to pull over because my hands were shaking too badly to steer. I sat there gasping, feeling my chest tighten in a way that scared me. My left arm tingled. My vision blurred. I fumbled for my phone, managed to call Yvette. Mama, how did it go? Baby. My voice didn't sound right. Baby, I think I'm having a heart attack. The last thing I heard before everything went dark was Yvette screaming my name. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, fluorescent lights too bright above me, the steady beep of a heart monitor next to me. Yvette sat in a chair beside the bed, her eyes red from crying. When she saw me awake, she grabbed my hand. Thank God. Mama? Thank God! What happened? You called me, said you thought you were having a heart attack. You were still on the phone when you passed out. I could hear the phone hit something. I called 911, told them where you were. They got there in 5 minutes. My heart. It wasn't a heart attack. Severe panic attack. Your blood pressure was through the roof. The doctor said you're lucky you pulled over when you did. If you'd been driving when you passed out. Her voice broke. I closed my eyes. Even lying down, I felt exhausted, defeated. She's going to win, Yvette. Candace is going to take the restaurant, and there's nothing I can do. Did you record the conversation? I'd forgotten about that. I looked around for my phone, found it on the bedside table. Yvette handed it to me, and I opened the recording app. The entire conversation was there. Every word. Candace admitting to the pattern of business acquisitions. Her confession that she'd deliberately destroyed the restaurant. Her threats about keeping me from the grandchildren. Oh, Mama. Yvette's eyes went wide. This is evidence. This is actual evidence. Evidence of what? She didn't confess to anything illegal. She was careful about that. And her threat about the grandchildren. A lawyer would say that's just conversation, not an actual threat. The door opened, and a nurse came in to check my vitals. Behind her, I saw someone else, a woman I didn't recognize, late 50s, wearing a business suit. Mrs. Washington? The woman stepped into the room. My name is Geneva Price. I'm an attorney. Your daughter called me. May I speak with you for a moment? I looked at Yvette, who nodded. She's a friend from Houston. Does property and business law. I told her everything. Geneva pulled up a chair on the other side of the bed. I listened to your recording, and I did some research into West Side Properties and your daughter-in-law's business practices. Mrs. Washington, what Candace has been doing isn't just unethical. It's potentially criminal fraud. If we can prove a pattern of deliberate sabotage for financial gain, we might be able to stop that auction and get your restaurant back." For the first time in 2 days, I felt something flicker in my chest. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. "How?" Geneva smiled. "Let me worry about the how. You just focus on getting better. We have 3 weeks before that auction. That's enough time to build a case. But I'm going to need your help. And it's not going to be easy." I thought about Candace's smile, her absolute certainty that she'd won. Thought about 40 years of my life being torn down for condo development. Thought about my grandchildren learning that you could destroy people and get away with it. "Tell me what you need," I said. Outside my hospital window, storm clouds were gathering. Thunder rumbled in the distance. The fight was just beginning. Geneva Price worked fast. Within 48 hours of our hospital meeting, she'd filed an emergency injunction to halt the auction, citing evidence of fraud and embezzlement. The judge granted us a temporary stay, giving us 2 more weeks to build our case. I was released from the hospital 3 days after my panic attack, with medication for my blood pressure and strict orders to avoid stress. Yvette had taken a leave of absence from her job in Houston and moved into my house. Every morning, she made me eat breakfast before Geneva arrived with more papers, more questions, more strategy. "We need to find the other victims," Geneva explained one morning, her laptop open on my kitchen table. "The families who lost their restaurants to Candace's scheme. If we can get them to testify, show a pattern of behavior, we strengthen our case significantly." I'd been thinking about that. The Harrises, they had a barbecue place on Memorial Drive, closed down about a year ago. And the Johnsons ran a fish spot in Decatur. That went under last spring. Geneva was already taking notes. "Do you know them? Would they talk to us?" "Evander Harris and I served on the church hospitality committee together for 15 years. I can call him." By that afternoon, I was sitting in Evander Harris's living room with Geneva, listening to a story that was painfully familiar. A consultant who promised to modernize their business, a relative brought in to handle finances, money disappearing, mysterious cost overruns, and then foreclosure. "Lost everything," Evander said, his voice heavy. He was 76, a retired postal worker who'd built his barbecue business from a food truck. 43 years of marriage, and I had to tell my wife we were bankrupt. She cried for a week straight. His wife, Dorothy, brought us sweet tea with hands that trembled slightly. "We're living with our daughter now, in her basement. At our age, we're supposed to be traveling, enjoying our grandchildren. Instead, we're trying to figure out how to survive on Social Security." "The consultant who worked with you," Geneva asked. "Do you remember her name?" "Candace Washington. Said she specialized in restaurant revitalization." Evander's jaw tightened. "Specialized in theft is more like it." Geneva looked at me. We had our pattern. Over the next week, we found 3 more families. All of them told the same story. All of them had lost their businesses within months of Candace getting involved. 2 of them had hired her cousin as a bookkeeper. One had taken a loan from an investment group that turned out to be connected to Candace. None of them had known about the others. Candace had kept them isolated, made each family think they were the only ones who'd failed. "We're going to need Terrence," Geneva said after our 5th interview. His testimony would be powerful, a son testifying about his own wife's fraud, especially when it hurt his mother. I shook my head. "He won't do it. She has him convinced this is all just bad luck and poor management." "Then we make him see the truth." Easier said than done. Terrence hadn't called me since our confrontation in the parking lot. According to Yvette, who'd been texting with him, he was working 2 jobs now. Day shift at a warehouse, night shift driving for a rideshare service, trying to keep his family afloat. It was Yvette who finally got him to meet with us. She told him I was sick, that I needed to see him. It wasn't entirely a lie. My blood pressure was still elevated, and the stress of the legal battle was taking its toll. He showed up at my house on a Sunday afternoon looking exhausted. His eyes had dark circles under them, and he'd lost weight. When he saw Geneva sitting at the kitchen table with legal documents spread out, his face hardened. "This is about Candace." "Sit down, son," I said. "Please, just listen." For a moment, I thought he'd leave, but something in my voice must have reached him because he pulled out a chair and sat down, arms crossed defensively. Geneva spent the next hour laying out the evidence, the pattern of failed businesses, the testimonies from other families, the financial records showing money transferred from the restaurant to Candace's personal accounts, the timeline showing how West Side Properties was formed specifically to buy foreclosed restaurants. Terrence listened in silence, his face unreadable. When Geneva finished, he sat there for a long moment, staring at the documents. "This doesn't prove anything," he finally said. "Consulting businesses fail. That's not fraud. And buying properties at auction is legal." "Terrence," I said softly, "baby, look at the pattern. 5 families, 5 restaurants, all destroyed the same way, all bought by your wife's company. Maybe they were all just bad at business. Maybe—" "Listen to this." Geneva pulled out her phone, played the recording from my conversation with Candace. My son's face went pale as he heard his wife's voice. 40 years of grease stains and outdated equipment. I'm teaching them that sentimentality is expensive. You lost. Accept it." The recording ended. Terrence sat there, something crumbling behind his eyes. "She said that to you? About keeping you from the kids?" "Yes." "And the part about me being weak?" I reached across the table, tried to take his hand, but he pulled away, stood up, walked to the window, his back to us. "How long have you known?" His voice was rough. "I found out the day you and I met at the restaurant. I've been investigating since then." "And you didn't tell me. Would you have believed me? Terrence, you wouldn't even let me criticize Candace without defending her. How was I supposed to tell you she'd been planning to destroy the restaurant from the beginning?" He was quiet for a long time. Outside, children were playing in the street, their laughter floating through the open window. "I'm such an idiot," he finally said. "No, baby. You trusted your wife. That's not idiocy. That's love. She used me. Used all of us." He turned around, and I saw tears on his face. "Mama, I'm so sorry. I lost everything you built. I let her destroy it, and I was too stupid to see what was happening." "You didn't lose it yet," Geneva interjected. "We have a hearing in 4 days. If Terrence testifies, if he's willing to provide documentation of the financial irregularities, we might be able to stop the auction and potentially recover the restaurant." "What would I have to do?" "Tell the truth. In court. Under oath. About everything you witnessed. She's my wife, the mother of my children." "And she's a criminal," Geneva said bluntly. "She defrauded you, your mother, and at least 4 other families. She stole hundreds of thousands of dollars, and if we don't stop her, she'll do it again to someone else." Terrence sank back into his chair, his head in his hands. "The kids. What happens to them if Candace goes to jail?" "They stay with you," I said, "and you'll have your mama right here to help you raise them." He looked up at me, and I saw my son clearly for the first time in years. Not the man Candace had molded him into, defensive and blind, but the boy I raised, the good man he'd always been underneath. "I'll do it," he said. "I'll testify." The hearing was held on a Thursday morning in Fulton County Superior Court. Geneva had warned me it wouldn't be a full trial, just a preliminary hearing to determine if there was enough evidence of fraud to halt the auction permanently and potentially file criminal charges. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and formal. I sat in the front row with Yvette on one side and Evander Harris on the other. Behind us, the other families Candace had defrauded filled the benches. Dorothy Harris, Malcolm and Keisha Johnson, the Patels who'd lost their fusion restaurant. We were a coalition of the wounded, all of us waiting for justice. Candace sat at the defendant's table with her attorney, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. She wore a conservative dress, pearls, her hair pulled back. She looked like someone's elegant aunt, not a woman who'd destroyed multiple families for profit. She didn't look at me. Not once. Terrence was the first witness called. As he walked to the stand, I saw Candace's jaw tighten. This was the betrayal she hadn't anticipated. Her husband, her puppet, turning against her. Under Geneva's questioning, Terrence laid out everything. The renovation that Candace had pushed for despite his objections. The hiring of her cousin over his protests. The financial records he'd been blocked from seeing. The luxury purchases Candace made while claiming the restaurant was struggling. His voice was steady, factual, but I could hear the pain underneath. "Mr. Washington," Geneva asked, "did you ever suspect your wife was deliberately sabotaging the restaurant?" "No. Not until my mother showed me the evidence. I trusted her completely. She's my wife. I thought—" His voice cracked. "I thought she loved me." Candace's lawyer cross-examined him aggressively, trying to paint him as an incompetent business owner looking for someone else to blame. But Terrence held firm. He had receipts, bank statements, emails, paper trails that Candace hadn't realized he'd kept. Next came the other restaurant owners, one by one, telling their stories. The judge, a black woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Monroe, listened with increasing intensity. When the fourth owner finished testifying, she held up a hand. "I've heard enough testimony for now. I'd like to ask Mrs. Washington some questions directly." Candace's lawyer looked alarmed. "Your Honor, that's irregular. This is my courtroom, counselor. Mrs. Candace Washington, please take the stand." Candace stood, smooth and confident. She was sworn in, sat down, arranged her dress carefully, still playing the role of the respectable businesswoman. Judge Monroe leaned forward. "Mrs. Washington, I've been on the bench for 23 years. I've heard a lot of fraud cases, and I have to say, the pattern presented here is remarkably consistent. 5 restaurants, 5 foreclosures, 5 properties purchased by your company at auction. That's quite a coincidence." "It's the nature of the restaurant business, Your Honor," Candace said smoothly. "The failure rate is very high. I saw opportunities to purchase undervalued properties in a developing neighborhood. That's just good business sense." "Good business sense." Judge Monroe picked up a document. "This is a recording submitted as evidence. I'd like to play a portion of it." My voice came through the courtroom speakers, then Candace's. "The land alone is worth that much. Once I tear down that building and sell to the developers who are putting in condos, I'll triple my investment." "Those memories don't pay property taxes." "What about Terrence? What about your children?" "I'm teaching them that sentimentality is expensive, that you can't eat legacy." The courtroom was silent. Candace's composure finally cracked, just a little, a tightness around her eyes. "Mrs. Washington," Judge Monroe said, "do you deny that's your voice on that recording?" "No, Your Honor. But that was a private conversation, taken out of context." "The context seems quite clear to me. You're admitting to purchasing properties with the specific intent of demolishing historic businesses for profit." "That's not illegal." "No, but fraud is. And testimony from your husband indicates you had access to financial records, approved the hiring of your cousin who subsequently embezzled $90,000 and made numerous personal purchases while the restaurant was failing. That establishes intent and conspiracy." Judge Monroe looked down at the papers in front of her, then back up at Candace. "I'm issuing an immediate and permanent injunction against the auction of Della's Kitchen. Furthermore, I'm ordering a full forensic audit of Westside Properties LLC and all associated accounts. The District Attorney's Office will be receiving a copy of this transcript and all evidence presented here today. They can decide whether to pursue criminal charges. She turned to me. Mrs. Washington, the elder Mrs. Washington, you are hereby restored as legal owner of the property formerly known as Della's Kitchen. The foreclosure is voided due to fraud. I couldn't breathe, couldn't process what I was hearing. Yvette grabbed my hand, squeezed it so hard it hurt. As for you, Mrs. Candace Washington, Judge Monroe continued, I'm freezing all assets of West Side Properties pending the audit. You are not to sell, transfer, or otherwise dispose of any properties or funds. Do you understand? Your Honor, this is... Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. Candace's voice was barely audible. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down, and the courtroom erupted. The other families were hugging, crying, thanking Geneva. Reporters who'd been in the back rushed forward. Terrence came down from the witness stand and walked straight to me. Mama, he said. And then he was crying, holding on to me like he was 8 years old again. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's okay, baby. It's over now. It's over. But it wasn't over. Not quite. 2 weeks later, the forensic audit revealed that Candace had stolen over $400,000 from various businesses and individuals. The DA filed charges, multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and racketeering. Her cousin was arrested in Chicago. Candace's bail was set at $500,000. She couldn't make it. The assets were frozen, and Terrence certainly wasn't going to help her. The divorce papers were filed 3 days after the criminal charges. I stood in front of Della's Kitchen on a Saturday morning in November, keys in my hand. The padlock was gone. The eviction notice was gone. Geneva had worked a miracle, getting the IRS to accept a payment plan for the back taxes, structured in a way I could actually afford. Terrence stood beside me, along with Yvette, her husband, and kids who'd flown in from Houston. Zion and Amara were there too, excited to see the restaurant their grandmother had built. You ready, Mama? Terrence asked. I unlocked the door. It swung open with a familiar creak. Inside, everything was dusty, neglected. The renovations Candace had made looked cheap and out of place. My old menu boards were gone, replaced with minimalist nonsense. But the bones were still there. The kitchen where I'd cooked for 40 years. The counter where I'd served thousands of customers. The soul of the place. It needs work, I said. We'll help, Yvette said. All of us. I'm going to need a manager, I added, looking at Terrence. Someone I can trust. Someone who's learned from their mistakes. My son met my eyes. I'll work for free, until I earn back what I lost. Nobody works for free in my restaurant, but you're going to work hard, harder than you've ever worked in your life. Yes, ma'am. Amara tugged on my sleeve. Grandma, can we help too? Baby girl, I'm going to teach you everything I know. Someday, this place might be yours. We spent the rest of the day cleaning, making plans. The other families Candace had defrauded stopped by, offering support. Evander brought his smoker, said we should do a partnership, combine soul food and barbecue. The Johnsons talked about doing a Friday fish fry. We were building something new from the ashes, a community of survivors turning pain into purpose. As the sun set, I stood at the front window, looking out at the street. 40 years ago, I'd stood in almost the same spot, newly opened, terrified and hopeful. Now I was back, older, scarred, but still standing. My phone buzzed. A text from Geneva. DA accepted plea deal. Candace gets 5 years, must pay full restitution to all victims. She took it to avoid trial. 5 years. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough for what she'd done. The families she'd hurt, the lives she'd destroyed. But it was justice. And sometimes, justice was enough. Terrence came to stand beside me. What are you thinking about? I'm thinking that your grandmother would be proud. She always said that Washington women were survivors. We bend, but we don't break. And Washington men? I looked at my son, really looked at him. He'd lost weight, but but he'd gained something more important: strength, clarity, purpose. "Washington men learn," I said, "and then they do better." He smiled, and I saw my husband in his face, saw the man he was becoming, the man he should have been all along. "Come on," I said. "Let's go home. We've got a restaurant to reopen, and that's going to take everything we've got." We locked up, all of us piling into various cars. Zion and Amara were chattering about helping paint, about learning to make cornbread. As we drove away, I looked back one more time at Della's kitchen. It was still standing, battered but undefeated, just like me. 3 months later, we had our grand reopening. The lines stretched around the block: old customers, new faces, reporters, city council members. Even the mayor showed up, talking about historic preservation and supporting Black-owned businesses. I stood in my kitchen, wearing my grandmother's old apron, cooking collard greens and fried chicken and peach cobbler. Terrence worked the front, seating customers with a smile that reached his eyes for the first time in years. Yvette managed the books, determined that nobody would ever steal from us again. And in the corner booth, Evander and Dorothy Harris sat with the Johnsons and the Patels, all of us survivors of Candace's schemes, all of us rebuilding our lives one meal at a time. We'd taken back what was ours. Not just the restaurant, but our dignity, our legacy, our hope. And that was worth more than all the money in the world. That's all for today's story. If this touched your heart, please subscribe and share your own experiences below. We're all in this together.